We experience
electron
four
lines.
dimensions, David. There's mathematical theories of everything that say there may be 14.
14, yeah. 14 dimensions.
All interwoven.
Well, I
and
think string theory, I think it was like 10 or something like that.
I think it's 10 or 11, but there's a new geometric, not so new geometrical
now they're saying 14?
representation. Might be 14. Welcome to the Dr. Gil Show. This is where we talk about medical matters that matter to you. My guest today is Dr. David McLaren. Welcome to the show, David.
Thanks, Gil. Thanks for having me. Pleasure being here. You have a nice setup.
Thank you very much. Yeah. David is a friend of mine. David is a board-certified neurologist. He's a medical doctor. He's been working in the area for many years. David is tapering down his practice, and now he's more of a consultant nowadays. But David is a certified teacher of Transcendental meditation.
Correct.
And I've been doing Transcendental meditation. I've had a great interest in TM, which we'll call it, since I was an early teen. And when I knew several years ago you were getting your final certification and training in Thailand and all this stuff, I was so happy to know that, and fascinated by the whole process. And I've really been looking forward to talking to you about the subject of Transcendental meditation, where it comes from, how you were taught about it, what made it interesting to you, and what's available to the public right now as far as learning about Transcendental meditation and learning how to do it.
Yeah, that sounds great. So let me tell you kind of first how I got into this. Okay?
Please do.
So I went to college my first year. I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And that has kind of a spiritual feel to it in the Southwest, you know. And I grew up there, and I went to school, first year of college, University of Oklahoma. I went back for the summer. And when I was in high school, you know, I was brought up Lutheran and kind of had to go through catechism classes and all that. And when I was around 16, I remember I was reading this book that my mom had about comparative religions. And I was talking about Buddhism and Hinduism, and talking about Zen and all these different concepts of the self and Atma and Samadhi and blissfulness and the inner self and things. And it really kind of caught my attention. I was really attracted to those ideas. And so that just kind of set with me. Well, in my high school years, you know, that's the time really when Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who brought Transcendental meditation to the world, really became you know, known throughout the world. Back in around the mid 60s, he was teaching Transcendental meditation, and then the Beatles started meditating. So the Beatles went to India with Maharishi and spent several months there with them. And then, you know, and everybody in the world, you know, knew about the Beatles. I mean,
what an entree into popularity.
So at that time, it's like, you know, then after that, Maharishi was really well known. People were really interested in Transcendental meditation. And so when I was 19, I was back home in Albuquerque for my first summer home. And a friend of mine said, hey, there's this teacher of Transcendental meditation coming through town. He just became a teacher. You know, he was in Europe, became a teacher. And he's like on his way to LA, and he's going to teach you a class in Transcendental meditation. Why don't we do this? I go, oh, yeah, that sounds really great. So, you know, at that time, it cost $35 to do it. It was a student fee, okay? And so, you know, $35, that's maybe like $450 nowadays.
Sure.
In terms of value, okay? So my mom, who grew up in the Depression, very, I mean, you know, every penny, you know, was saved.
Yeah, I know the mindset.
Yeah, okay. So I go, my mom would never give me, you know, money for anything, really. My mom would go, hey, Mom, I want $35 to learn Transcendental meditation. She said, oh, yeah, great. Here you go.
She was already sold.
Yeah, she was already, she says, that sounds great. So I said, oh, okay. So that's when I started. So I learned Transcendental meditation when I was 19, and I, you know, continued to practice it and practice it and practice it. And when I was in between the summer of college and medical school, a friend of mine had become a teacher of Transcendental Meditation that I knew in college, and he said, "Hey, there's going to be this big course of meditation. We're all going to kind of get together in this new college in Fairfield, Iowa. And let's go up there and we'll spend 6 weeks in deep meditation in Fairfield, Iowa." And I had 6 weeks off, okay? And it didn't really cost anything. And I had like a little, I think I had a VW Fastback or something back
perfect.
then, like the first fuel injected car ever in the nation, and it was a piece of junk. But I made it to Iowa, and I spent 6 weeks meditating. I loved it. It was great. I went back, and so from then on, I would go up to Iowa every now and then to do some deep meditation.
And that school is still in Iowa.
Yeah, so
what's the name of it?
It's Maharishi International University. It's an accredited university. It's they do things in regards to consciousness and meditation, but it's actually really well known for its business school, accounting in particular, computer science. There's a lot of international students go there. And then David Lynch has a film production, film school up there as well.
This is a real accredited university. This is not just some hippie ashram.
No,
this
have,
is the real thing.
They have undergraduate programs, graduate programs, doctoral programs. I mean, it's accredited by whatever that national accreditation thing is. Yeah. So they get the appropriate funding and stuff. So it's a small school. There's just a few thousand students up there, but there's a lot of online students nowadays as well. So I would go up there every night. So I would practice Transcendental Meditation, at home, and then I went through medical school, and then I moved to Chicago, and then I eventually came here to Columbia, Missouri to do private practice in neurology. And when I first came here, I was very, very, very busy. It was just a very kind of big culture shock for me. And the call schedule was horrendous, and I got really burned out. I mean, even though I was meditating in the morning, evening, it was just a lot. I would miss meditations. I wasn't feeling that well. So I started going back up to Fairfield and spending a week up there, about every 3 or 4 months, doing some deep meditation. I would get so rejuvenated and so refreshed. I could come back here, work really hard. I'd get rid of that stress, that fatigue, that burnout. It would just wash away, and I'd be ready to go for several more months. So I kept on doing that. So the last 10 or 15 years, I really wanted to become a teacher of Transcendental Meditation. This would be a great thing to teach other people.
And kind of do it in the later part of your life.
Yeah. So I had a child later in life, and I had to work and make money to get him through college. But once he was through here at the University of Missouri, he got a degree in business and stuff. I said, okay, I'm done. So I quit private practice, and I applied to teacher training in Transcendental Meditation. It's a very hard program to get into. There was only one other American there at the teacher training program besides me.
And where was this teacher training program?
This was in Chantaburi, Thailand.
Thailand. You had to go to the other side of the world for your training.
Southeast Thailand, and I had never experienced the monsoon. And I'll tell you what, the first 4 months, it rained nonstop. For 4 months, it always felt like it was 110 degrees with 100% humidity all the time.
Because it was.
So we were in these little buildings, and we had to go to different buildings for different things. But you always had to carry your umbrella with you. Because, you'd go to one building. If you didn't take your umbrella, by the time you went to the next building for something else, it just downpour, So every room had an umbrella, kind of was the room number on it, and you took it with you everywhere. And you wore sandals. We wore long pants, but we would roll the pants up to our knees because you're walking in water. And it was just...
Was there mosquitoes?
Oh my God, yeah.
So you had to really do a penance.
Snakes, scorpions, and they had these centipedes that were like a foot long, about an inch in diameter, and they were red. And they would just crawl around, and they were poisonous. So if you stepped on one at night or something, you'd end up in the hospital, like in a chemical coma for several days because the pain and the swelling was so bad. So it was an adventure.
You had to be serious about this too. You had to want it.
So it was 6 months. It was 7 days a week. It started at 6 a.m. and you went to bed at 10 p.m. It was a very intensive training program.
So you learned a lot.
It was all designed by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. Everything that was in that course, he designed. And he passed away in 2008. But everything that I learned there, I watched hundreds of hours of videotape of Maharishi because whenever he was doing teaching and speaking, they would videotape him. They have hundreds of thousands of hours of videotape of Maharishi. And a lot of them are still in a vault in a basement someplace in Switzerland. Like kept
Uh-huh.
all that stuff. So all that stuff that I learned was designed by Maharishi. He wanted to train more teachers so that the Transcendental meditation can be learned by anybody in the world. And it's amazing what this man did actually, because he arrived in San Francisco in December of 1959. Okay,
And he'd been living in India.
he grew up in India. People don't know this about Maharishi, but he had an advanced degree in physics. He was
I'll
very
be
interested.
darned.
He was excellent in math and physics. He was very much into nuclear physics, quantum mechanics, all that fancy
Wow.
stuff. Yeah. So he didn't meet his teacher. Back in India they call it a guru. He didn't meet his teacher until he was actually in graduate school, and he
In
wanted to.
India.
Yeah, and he wanted to stay with him. His teacher said no, go back to school, complete your studies, and then come back and see me. So he did, and then he stayed with his teacher for several years, kind of learning from him.
So it comes from a Hindu tradition, which
It
goes
comes from a Vedic tradition. So
Vedic. What is the
yeah,
difference?
so the Vedic tradition actually precedes what we think of Hinduism by several thousand years, probably about 2,000 years.
So this goes
This is
way back,
way
David.
back. So this is in the northern India part, in the Himalayas, really. Okay. So in the West, we're familiar with like the Brahma Sutras, the Yoga Sutras, the Upanishads. So those are kind of some of the things, some of the literature that here in the West that we are familiar with, and those are all actually of the Vedic tradition. Now
Ah,
there's lots of different, I'd say, volumes of books of Vedic literature, but originally they were all just oral tradition that later got written down into Sanskrit. Okay,
okay.
so that there's the Rig Veda and there's all these different subsets of Vedic literature, and the Upanishads and things like that are just a very small part of it. So that's the tradition that it came from. That's actually precedes what later became the Hindu tradition. Transcendental meditation is just a technique of meditation. It's a technique of consciousness, and there are no beliefs. There has nothing to do with Hinduism. I don't teach philosophy. I don't teach beliefs. You don't have to change your lifestyle.
So this is not
It's just
anti-Christian. It's not pro any religion at all.
right.
I understand it's very accepting
So
and
interestingly, when we were
non-judgmental.
talking about the school I went to,
Yes.
so you buddied up with a guy. There was like 30 men on one part of the campus and like 30 women on the other part of the campus. My buddy was Rabea, and Rabea was from Beirut, and he was Muslim. So there were several Muslims there. Okay, so Rabea was Muslim. He was of what's called the Druze, Druze tradition, which
Ah,
I'd never heard of, but he taught me a little bit about it. So there were some Hindus there. There was a guy from India who I got to know very well, Alok. There was a guy from Bangladesh, Bengal, and he was Hindu. There was 3 Japanese fellows. They were all Buddhists. Okay.
ah.
There were kids from Bali. There were 3 teenage kids from Bali. Their whole high school does Transcendental meditation, and they have a kind of a Vedic tradition that's been there for centuries. So practically the whole nation, well, it's not a nation, the island, a lot of people do Transcendental meditation, and most of the schools do it there. So they came, and there were Russians there, there were Germans there, there were French people there. So and there was only one other American.
So
So it's very eclectic in terms of all the religions of the world were basically there, and we're all kind of learning how to become transcendental meditation teachers. So we don't teach any kind of religion, meditation, beliefs. It's a technique of consciousness. It's a technique of meditation, and we don't even talk about philosophy or beliefs.
that's fascinating. Now, meditation has been a part of understanding of religions, of cultures for thousands of years. And there's many different types of meditations, there's many different types of meditative practices. And I know they all have some similarities, but there's some actual differences in technique and whatnot that I'd like to flesh out, unpack a little bit with you.
You can take most forms of meditation and you can divide them up kind of into 3 different groups. Okay, you can take focus style of meditations where there's kind of a concentration technique. Okay, so and Zen would be kind of in that tradition. There's kind of open monitoring techniques. Mindfulness would be in that tradition. There's contemplative techniques, okay, which is more in the Western tradition. Say, in Western tradition, we think of meditation, not so much nowadays, but say back when I was a kid, meditation thought, well, you took a proverb or something, some saying out of the Bible, and you would think, have deep thoughts about it in terms of how it was going to affect your life, how you could put it to greater use in your life, and what you would do in your life to try to fulfill whatever that saying was. So it was a thinking process, a contemplation. And
Right.
transcendental meditation is what's what we call an automatic transcending process. So it's different from those other forms of meditation. What's interesting, there's different, I'm board certified in neurology, but I'm also board certified in electroencephalography, EEG,
Wow.
brainwave analysis. So when you
Oh.
look at brainwave tests, there's different
Ah.
styles of brainwave activity for each style of meditation. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
please explain that. I think
Well,
that transcendental meditation fosters alpha waves. The mindfulness you mentioned was more theta waves, and the concentration accentuated beta waves.
exactly correct.
Am I
Exactly
on that?
correct.
Okay.
So when we concentrate on something like on anything really, like trying to solve an algebra problem or something like that, or if you're like in Zen meditation, you're concentrating on you're focusing on a flame or whatever your technique is. The predominant brainwave activity is very low voltage but very fast activity, what we call beta activity. It's usually like 16 to 25 cycles per second in terms of how fast the brainwaves are going. So that's the predominant type of brainwave activity that we see in people that are focusing on something. That's the type of brainwave activity we see in Zen type of meditation.
Got a question for you. I play chess, and I will spend a long time on trying to figure out a move. Would that count in? And I'm attracted to it. I find that very pleasurable trying to figure out the right move. Would that kind of be in that category?
Well,
Maybe.
that's in that category, but I wouldn't call that a meditation per se. It's probably a little different than Zen techniques.
Okay.
But now, if you look at like mindfulness techniques and you do brainwave monitoring during those techniques, it's more of a 4, 5, 6, 7, not 4, 5, 6, 7 cycles per second. It's more of a slower type of brainwave activity you see predominantly over the brain. And that's kind of people when you're just kind of having an open awareness and you're kind of having non-judgmental perceptions of whatever your body is feeling, the thoughts that come and go in a kind of non-judgmental way. In transcendental meditation, what you see is you see high voltage alpha activity that starts over the back of the brain, the occipital area.
Hmm.
And that is what we see in people who are in a state of restful alertness. And that's really what transcendental meditation is, kind of physically and in terms of brain physiology. It's a state of restful alertness. And that high voltage brainwave activity, that alpha activity, spreads over the entire brain. It doesn't just stay in the back of the brain where we normally see it. But it's really amazing when you actually see this visually. It spreads over the entire brain. And not only does it spread over the entire brain, but it becomes synchronous in terms of comparing the left hemisphere activity to the right hemisphere activity and the
Ah.
back of the brain with the front of the brain. So that's called brainwave coherence or EEG coherence. So that's something that's very unique in regards to transcendental meditation, obviously. So it's a very enhanced form of very deep restful alertness that we're seeing physically. There's a bunch of other physiologic parameters that you can study and that have been studied in transcendental meditation in terms of measuring prolactin levels, serotonin levels, cortisol levels, serum lactate levels, heart rate, blood pressure, all those things while people are
Wow.
meditating, even functional MRI imaging. So there's all these other physical parameters that we can talk about in terms of the kind of changes that we see when people are practicing transcendental meditation. But let me talk a little bit more about kind of the technique itself. It's taught, the first day is always taught one-on-one, okay? It's me with the student. It usually takes about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And usually I'll have a meeting with the student for a half hour, hour and a half prior to that, prior to my actually teaching, so I can kind of learn about what the student's about and stuff. So I can select the appropriate sound or mantra that we use. It's a mantra-based type of meditation, and we'll talk more
Yes,
about
I
that
want to talk
in a
more
minute.
about that.
So the way we teach is that first day is one-on-one. It's me with the student. That's why I had to go to Thailand for 6 months just to learn how to do this properly, because it's a very powerful technique, and so you have to make sure that you're doing the right mantra with the right person. So that's why you need a teacher. It's a one-on-one process. And then the next 3 days It's usually spend like about 2 hours per day for the next 3 days to kind of answer questions, to kind of get the technique down, you know. But typically after a week or two of practice, people are very adept at it. It's, you know, they get it.
Mm.
Most of the time when I teach people, they get it the first day. It's boom, it just happens. And what happens is that they're they're they get this intense feeling of relaxation, peacefulness, almost a blissful feeling, heavy relaxation in the body, and that's their subjective sensation. They come out and they go, "Wow, that's incredible. That's tremendous. This is superb," and that's most. For some people, it takes a little bit longer. It kind of depends on the person and what kind of state their health and physiology and what their mental state is in at the time that they learn and things.
I'm going to tell you a very profound experience I had. Um, when I was 12, 13, we were living in campgrounds in Europe and met this lovely young couple. And I was a kid and I went up to their van. I knocked on their van. I forget what I wanted to talk to them about. And it was quiet. I knocked again and I just heard, "We're meditating, please come back." And fine. So, and later on that day, we're at the campfire having dinner or whatever, and I talked to them. And there were these lovely people. They seemed like they had it together. They were people I wanted to meet. And I said, "Well, what do you do?" I said, "We're doing transcendental meditation." So when I came back to the States, I was 13. Um, Somebody had mentioned a class. Maybe they even came by my school. I said, "We're offering class." So I went to a class like this, one-on-one. And I'll never forget, the instructor whispered a mantra in my ear and just said, "Start repeating it over and over." And I almost fell off my chair. It was like this wave fell into myself. It was a whole another experience
Yeah.
of existence, of consciousness. I will never forget that moment as long as I live, David.
Yeah, that's really beautiful the way you say that. And I had the same experience when I learned when I was 19, was just this deep falling into myself. That's beautiful the way you said that.
Mm.
It actually felt like I was falling into myself, self with the big S, not the self with the little s, not the id, not the ego, not what we normally think is a personality, but falling into myself, that big S, that big peaceful unbounded awareness.
And that's the transcending.
That's the transcending process. And so it's really interesting how this works. It's a very natural technique, okay? We're just using the way the brain's hardwired already, okay? We're all capable of having this experience, but we just don't know how to get there. Our brain is hardwired to have this experience of transcendental consciousness, this pure, unbounded awareness. It's there, okay? We just kind of lost our ability to find that spot. Some people will experience that, you know, spontaneously in their life at certain points in time, okay? So we all have that capability. If you're anywhere near normal neurologically, you know, if you're awake, alert, and can talk and think, you can practice transcendental meditation. You can learn it easily. So what the technique does, the mantra does, it's a certain sound. It's a sound that is picked particularly for you, let's say, and that goes along with it. It has all kind of good life-supporting effect, okay? And what that does, it helps to keep our mind alert but undirected. And what it does, it allows the mind to just naturally go to that which it normally would like to think is more pleasing, okay, more peaceful. We all kind of have this desire, you know, not all the time, but we have a desire to have more peace, to have more happiness, to have more of that inner stability, okay? And our mind will go there if we give it the opportunity. So it's kind of like going to sleep in a way. It's like, you know, we don't try to go to sleep. We just set up circumstances, okay? I'm board certified in sleep as well. So you know, we brush our teeth, we put on our pajamas, you know, we do something, you know, say our midnight prayer or whatever, you know, and then we lay down, we turn off the lights and we go to sleep. We're just setting up the physiologic circumstances so that our brain will be allowed to go to sleep, okay? In transcendental meditation, we're just setting up circumstances that allows our brain to experience these deeper, quieter, more subtle states of thought, of that thought of the mantra, until finally that just drops off and then we fall into ourself, as you said. Okay.
Hearing this from you, David, as a multiply board certified neurologist who understands the brain function behind this. I mean, it gives this such weight and authenticity and bona fide. Uh, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? This is a very real, important phenomenon, and I want to interject that people in the government over the years have been very interested in this, and agencies such as the Defense Department and whatnot have put millions of dollars into this because they, John, this was a quote from one of the websites I read, that transcendental meditation has been shown to have wide ranging benefits in markedly reducing stress, improving overall health, and boosting creativity and performance. And you can imagine you have soldiers burning out, they're tired, you need them to be at the top of their game. Um, you can think of athletes, you can think of chess players, you can think of surgeons, doctors, you can think of anybody that who wouldn't be interested in boosting creativity and performance.
Yeah, well, let's talk about a couple of those groups, okay?
Please.
So, healthcare providers. Man, there are so many burned out healthcare providers, physicians, nurses,
it's a daily
EMTs.
challenge.
Man, and it's just tremendous, and it just keeps getting worse. And then, I mean, when COVID hit, it just it went to the nth degree. So, so transcendental meditation. Remember when I was talking about how I would get burned out and I would go and do some deep meditation,
And
come back all
recharge.
refreshed. And on a daily basis, it works. Okay, and so on the East Coast in particular, and some on the West Coast, the David Lynch Foundation helped to fund large programs where they taught physicians and other healthcare providers transcendental meditation, and then they actually studied the rates of burnout, depression, and anxiety in these groups. And there's a marked reduction in all those three factors in the people that learn transcendental meditation. So it's very helpful in those.
And I think there's some graphs here in this wonderful brochure you showed me that actually shows real data.
There's a lot of real data about that.
There's some real data about that.
The other group that I wanted to talk about briefly was, you talked about the military. First of all, around the world in lots of different countries, transcendental meditation is taught to police force and military because of their levels of burnout and their levels of stress.
Oh, can you
The United
imagine
States
a
government,
police officer, oh my goodness.
The Defense Department has a multi-million-dollar program studying, again, the use of transcendental meditation in veterans with PTSD.
Oh, I'm so glad you're getting to that.
I want to talk a little bit about the physiology of that as well. Okay?
Please.
So, people who have traumatic, especially in combat, traumatic experiences, it changes their brain, actually, okay? These are the veterans that come back and they can't function in society. They're sleeping with a gun under the bed. There's a wolf at the door every second. Everything is threatening, They're anxious all the time. They're depressed. Their suicide rates are extremely high.
Every 7 a day or something, just every 20 seconds, amazing. Whatever it is, it's just huge. Yeah.
So they did a study that was published in Lancet, published in 2019, comparing transcendental meditation to immersion therapy, which is kind of the previous gold standard in therapy for veterans with PTSD. Okay. And they compared these two different techniques of treatment in combat veterans with PTSD, and they found transcendental meditation to be as good and sometimes better than the immersion therapy. The immersion therapy has a lot of consequences to it. I mean, they're kind of recreating these horrible battle things and trying to get them, adjusted to it. Whereas transcendental meditation is a totally different way about it.
Right.
So the Defense Department now has funded another program to do in multiple hospitals in the VA to study this program again, to make it more widely available. Now, a friend of mine who's a transcendental meditation teacher in Arizona happens to know some people here in Columbia that are associated with the Veterans United company. And they have agreed to fund the teaching of transcendental meditation for veterans with PTSD. So there's these kind of things that are going on. But let's talk about the brain physiology in that, okay?
Please.
So what happens when, not only in combat veterans with PTSD, but anybody, police or healthcare providers, emergency room people in particular, people who've gone through physical assault, rape victims, they'll have changes in their amygdala. Okay, what happens is that the amygdala is part of the brain that's in the deep inner part of the temporal lobe. Okay, it's like a little walnut shaped
Little
structure.
almond. I think amygdala means almond.
Almond, right? Greek for almond. That's
Almond.
right, almond. I said walnut, but it looks like a walnut, but it's shaped like an almond. So that gets hyperactive. That gets turned on, so that when you do functional MRI imaging in someone with PTSD, you see that the amygdala is like just burning up. Okay, it's like on all the time. Okay, because that's our major fight-flight center. Okay, that's our fight-flight. That's a primitive part of our brain. The primitive part of that what's called limbic system that gives you that fight-flight response. Okay, so it's always on. So when you do functional MRI imaging in people doing the transcendental meditation technique, what you see is a cooling down of that amygdala. And that's why it's so effective in people who have these kind of problems, is it changes the brain physiology. Okay, so that's how it works in treating people with PTSD. So it's just very useful in those kinds of things. If you look at other kinds of problems with brain physiology and how it reflects in behavior and society in general, if you do functional MRI imaging in people who are bad criminals, these really bad guys, okay?
Okay.
These guys have been in prison because they killed a lot of people or done bad things. So these psychopath kind of individuals, if you do functional imaging, they basically don't have any metabolic activity in their frontal lobes, in their prefrontal cortex in particular, okay, up here.
So where you're supposed to be making these decisions.
Yeah. So what's the prefrontal cortex do? It's your CEO of the brain. It gives you your upper level cognitive reasoning. It gives you ethical reasoning. It gives you moral reasoning. It allows you to plan for the consequences of your action. What the future consequences are going to be of your action. If your frontal lobes aren't working, you don't have those capabilities, which is why teenagers are so notorious for being crazy. Because if you look at how the brain matures, okay, frontal lobes don't become entirely connected with the rest of the brain by a process called myelination. For men, until about the age of 25, and for women, maybe a year or a little earlier, 24, 23.
Really?
So, in teenagers, all the rest of the brain works pretty good, but they don't have the ability to kind of, think about the future consequences of their action. They don't have that part of the brain that's going to kind of give them their filter, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah. So what's interesting is if you look at functional imaging in people doing transcendental meditation, there's increased blood flow, increased metabolic activity in the frontal lobe bilaterally, okay? So if you look at the rate of recidivism means if you're in prison and then you get out and you go back to prison,
right?
Recidivism. So these studies were done back in the 70s, okay? If you look at recidivism in people that have learned transcendental meditation while they're in prison, recidivism is cut in half. It's the most effective form of treatment of prisoners to reduce recidivism that's ever been seen.
Because that's one
that's
of the
how it
big
works.
problems with the whole correction system, that people aren't getting rehabbed and they come out dangerous and they go back in.
They just learn better techniques to terrorize other people from other prisoners. So
look at this and just for people that want to see, here's some bar graphs showing actual data.
So where was that published?
This was published.
Let's talk a little bit about science.
Journal of Criminal Justice, 1987. Journal of Offender Rehab, 2003. And these are statistically significant changes. On page 20.
I want to talk about that very statement, that because not everybody watching this is probably a doctor. So, when you do scientific studies, there's a certain chance that the results of what you find in your study may just come up from chance, okay?
From chance, yeah.
So, you use statistical probability, mathematics, to try to decide what is statistically significant and what isn't, in terms of like, well, this could have happened just by random that you found this.
Sure.
Okay? So it's been decided that if the chances of finding that result has been determined to happen less than 5% of the time, a p-value less than 0.05.
1 in 20.
Then it's scientifically, medically significant. If you look at the p-values of like every study that's been published in this review of effects of transcendental meditation, the p-values are
Yeah, it's
phenomenally
less than
low.
1 in 1,000.
Yeah,
That this
it's
is
just
just a
incredible.
lucky. This
Yeah.
This is a happenstance finding.
Yeah. So let's talk about one other thing since we're doctors, okay?
Sure.
Let's talk about reduced rates of death, heart attack, and stroke.
Boy, I mean, that's
So,
how they sell a lot of drugs.
How many strokes did I see when I was in practice? And the longer I was in practice, the more likely it was that the people I was seeing with strokes were younger and younger. And that has statistically been proven out as well.
So,
With my
so
personal
that's
experience-
also something that's been seen. This
Yeah.
is documented. Strokes are happening
right,
earlier.
in younger people.
I'll
Yeah.
be darned.
Because there's greater rates of obesity, hypertension, diabetes, drug use, stimulant
Things that
use,
hurt the brain.
things that hurt the brain. So there's been a study that's been funded by the National Institute of Health to look at how well does transcendental meditation reduce the risk of heart attack, stroke, and death. So what they did is they took a large group of people, and to get into the study, you had to have a heart attack. That was
All
your,
right, so you're already at high risk.
that was your entry criteria. Okay, you had to have a heart attack.
Right.
And so they took half the people and they gave them the usual medical education. They said, okay,
Okay.
Eat this, don't eat that, exercise, blah blah, watch your blood sugar. So they gave them the real education, and they did that. The other half, they taught them transcendental meditation. Okay.
In
So
addition to that,
No. Well, maybe in addition. To tell you the truth, I'm not sure if it was in addition to, but
Okay.
they compared those two groups.
but one
okay?
group did
And this-
meditate, did TM, one
Yeah.
did not.
And this study is still ongoing. Okay.
Ah,
So if you look, and this is on page 13, if you want to look at this,
I would.
and we'll show that this is also a p-value of 0.03. TM program or health education control group, 47% lower risk for death, heart attack, and stroke in the TM group over an average of 5 years compared to controls. This
So
study is
here's
still
the
ongoing.
blue. The
okay?
blue column is a lot smaller,
A lot
shorter
smaller, okay?
than the red
I mean,
column.
you're reducing your risk of recurrent heart attack or a stroke or death by half. If you had a
Stat-
pill, if
Get
you
a
had a
pill to
pill
do that, right.
would do that,
Statins,
man,
it's only
people
like
pay a lot of money for that
0.3%
pill.
or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if Pfizer did that, man, I'd buy stock in that.
Yeah, I'd buy
company.
stock in that one. I'd take that pill.
So this study's still ongoing, and I've heard, I haven't actually visualized, seen the data, but I've heard that the data ongoing for I think it's 8 years now or something, is even more profound. So it's a huge
It wasn't a
effect.
blip. It's a trend. It's a
huge
powerful
effect.
trend.
It's a huge effect. Yeah. So, and this technique it's so easy, and it's a natural technique. We're not putting anything in. Okay, we're just using things that are already there. Okay.
And we're not changing your belief system. They're not changing your religion. You're not having to send lots of money to some.
There's no philosophy.
You're not supporting some terrorist group.
No.
This is just simply a technique.
No, and it's supported by Maharishi Foundation International. Maharishi Foundation USA, which is a non-for-profit educational organization. Okay, so that's the foundation that is behind the teaching here. And there's the David Lynch Foundation, which also kind of helps teach certain groups like veterans of PTSD or healthcare workers or inner city children and stuff like that. So
Wow.
the technique is so easy and so simple, and it's amazing how profound the results are. It's just and every study that you look at, atherosclerosis, hypertension, diabetes, improved academic performance, decreased anxiety, markedly increased creativity, which is interesting.
That's very interesting.
That when you transcend that pure awareness, that transcendental consciousness, Maharishi also called that creative intelligence. He also called it the unified field of consciousness, which we'll talk about maybe in a minute.
Sure.
But he also called it creative intelligence. He says that's the source of creativity. And so when people transcend, if you look at how functional brain changes occur in people with transcendental meditation, if you look at kind of higher levels of brain function in regards to IQ testing, grade point averages, and things like that, the thing that's most profoundly helped or increased is creativity, which is interesting. And we need lots of creativity in this world to solve all the problems we have.
I think Einstein said something that creativity was more important than intelligence or imagination. I think he said.
Yeah, maybe the same thing.
Maybe the same thing.
Yeah. So interesting, very interesting stuff. So what I was going to say? Oh yeah. So Maharishi also called it kind of the unified field of consciousness. Okay?
Yeah, to explain that,
So,
please.
yeah, so, in Western thought, we think of consciousness as being an individual phenomena. I have my consciousness, you have your consciousness. I have
In the
my own, you have
extreme, and
your,
here,
you
here's
have
a
your
word.
opinion, I have my opinion,
Right.
okay?
One of my favorite words is solipsism. It says the only thing you can believe is yourself. Everything else might not be real. It's just me that I can believe because it's the only thing I can experience.
So Maharishi said that, at a deeper level, at the transcendental level, but that's not really the case. That there's really a field effect of consciousness. Okay, he says it's like there's a radio transmitter, and there's a field effect. There's a field of transmission that radio signal gets throughout the entire area. Okay, he says that the same thing happens in terms of human consciousness. We're kind of aware of this concept, maybe not using that terminology, but we're kind of aware of kind of a group awareness. We think about
Right.
national mood. Okay,
Sure.
there's been studies to show, like, to try to predict which way the stock market's going to go by what kind of music people listen to. Okay, and it's actually been kind of successful from what I understand.
Yeah, this is not kooky stuff. I mean,
So
it's
there's
even
a national mood, there's a national consciousness. That what we think of that.
Yeah, and fields may be much more complex and maybe at a quantum level, and it may even have implications for evolution and whatnot.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
things that we don't understand. I mean, it's like,
Right.
look at in terms of like quantum theory and stuff. Look at if you take two particles and kind of split them, and one has upspin and one has downspin, and you separate those two
They're
particles.
still linked.
They're still linked. What's that
Light
called?
years apart. Entanglement
Quantum entanglement
is a real thing.
and that's been proved to actually happen. You can put a particle, split them, put one particle up in orbit above the United States, change the spin of the particle that's down here in some laboratory, and instantly the particle up there in orbit changes its spin. I mean, how does that happen?
They're working on quantum computers.
I mean,
entangled states.
So there's things that we don't understand. It's like, we thought we knew, the universe is growing, it's expanding and stuff, and then they put the Hubble telescope up, and all of a sudden it's discovering these galaxies that, whoa, wait a second, those galaxies that are that far out aren't supposed to be that old. Maybe we need to rethink our whole cosmology.
And things are
It's
spreading faster, maybe.
And there's like, well, there's dark matter and there's dark energy and stuff, and it's like now they're thinking maybe we're just totally wrong about things, or maybe things we don't understand. So, and this isn't goofy mysticism stuff.
Not at all.
Okay, it's just a different layer of reality. It's just a different layer of reality. It's like we have layers of molecules, layers of atoms, layers of.
We experience 4 dimensions, David. There's mathematical theories of everything that say there may be 14.
14, yeah. 14 dimensions.
All interwoven.
Well, I think string theory, I think they said it was like 10 or something like that.
I think it's 10 or 11, but there's a new not so new geometrical representation. Might be 14 with all these fiber fields and interconnections. So I think we can all agree that the world is mysterious and there's more to be learned. But I'm going to come back to TM here. There's some not wackadoodle stuff.
No, there's some good things on YouTube by Dr. Tony Nader, who kind of took Maharishi's place as the head of the TM organization, as well as John Hagelin, who's the president of Maharishi National University. John Hagelin is a very well-known, renowned quantum physicist who did a lot of work on string theory years ago, and his papers on string theory are very well known. He's now the president of Maharishi National University, and they do a really good job of talking about this level of the phenomenon in terms of quantum field. I'm not a physicist, and I can't really. My brain can't wrap around those things and describe them.
They have different brains, those guys. Yeah.
But they have a very astute understanding of it.
So we've shown here that this technique goes back thousands of years. Very smart people have been involved in its development, its dissemination. We see there's scientific data showing benefits, and you and I have both. You a lot more than I have. I don't meditate every day. I do have meditative practices. Another one, it may not be like playing chess, but fly fishing. When I'm focused on that fly, waiting for the hit. And another meditative practice I have now is I like looking for artifacts or arrowheads and creeks. And it's a very meditative process. You're looking at billions, I counted, just billions of rocks, trying to see, trying to be aware for that piece to come out and reach your level of consciousness, and you pick it out of it. It's an incredible regenerative activity. So now, can you tell us, how does one meditate? Can you, as a teacher, give us just a basic overview? How does one perform transcendental meditation?
So it's done sitting in a chair, eyes closed, 20 minutes, twice a day.
Okay.
And that's it. You do it 20 minutes twice a day. You take a little time going in, a little time coming out. And the rest of the day, you do your normal daily activity. Okay. The effect of TM lasts throughout the day. Okay. So it makes you more able to withstand the stresses of the day, make better decisions through the day. The day goes easier. Then you get home, you meditate again, it kind of rejuvenates you. So that's the way the practice is done.
And you don't do it before bed. You do it kind of in the evening time, and then you don't go to sleep immediately, I believe.
Yeah, you do it usually before your evening meal. So that's how it's done. So, and we tell people, it's nice to do it in a quiet surrounding, but you can do it in a car, in a train, in a plane. I've meditated a lot on airplanes. It's a very nice place to meditate, actually. So you can meditate anywhere. The noise is that we're not concentrating. We're not trying to drive out thoughts. Okay, thoughts occur in meditation. We don't try to drive them out. Okay, they come and they go, but it doesn't inhibit us from doing that transcending process. Eventually, things, in a few minutes, they just quiet down and you get that experience. Now, the meditation is kind of cyclic in a way in that, we start at a certain active thinking level. So let's think of it this way. So it's kind of like an ocean, and you have these big waves on the surface of the ocean. Okay, a lot of activity going on and wind. That's kind of like our active thinking level of the brain. That's where your brain and my brain's at right now. It's our active thinking level. We're talking, we're concentrating, we're trying to communicate. Okay, but there's deeper levels of the brain. If you look at the ocean, there may be, huge 100-foot waves on the surface of the ocean, but you go down to the inner depths of the ocean, like a mile deep, and it's very quiet, very still. Okay, so that active thinking level of the brain, that's there, but with the TM process, we're able to experience these quieter, deeper, more subtle levels of awareness and consciousness. It's a technology of consciousness that allows us to experience this. And it's very easy to do.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the technique and the mantra?
So the mantra is a meaningless sound. It has a very good, all good life-supporting effect. It's one that's chosen by your teacher and given to you. And it's one that's just easily repeated at the beginning of the practice, and then it kind of gets a little more subtle and more refined, and then it goes away, and then you have this experience of falling into yourself, as you said. Okay. So other than that, then you have to, if you come and I'll teach you, then I can kind of give you more specifics about the technique.
Yeah, I'm not looking for all the nuts and bolts here, and that's why you need a teacher, and it's something you need a guidance on. I just wanted to just briefly explain that.
And that guidance, it's like the course 4 days, and typically, and then usually I'll see people back like 1 day, 10 to 14 days. And if people want to come back and tune up their meditation, then there's a fee at the beginning if it goes to the foundation, but there's no fees after that. You've got this for lifelong. You're basically, for the cost of a cell phone, you've got it for your whole life. It's not like you get the cell phone, then you got to pay the Verizon or whoever for your monthly fee. It's just a one-time, and you're good to go for the rest of your life.
You're not getting wealthy doing this, David.
No. In fact, I've lost a lot of money. It cost me a lot of money to go to teacher training, and I'll never make that money back. So it's like,
so there you go.
Yeah, so
you do it for the right reasons.
Yeah, and I tell you what, I wish I would have done it a long time ago, because it's the most fun. It's the most fulfilling thing I've ever done. Is teaching TM. It is a charge. It is great. It is to give people that experience that you just described.
Yeah.
When you were, how old were you?
13.
13. To give that experience to people, they come out and go, wow. It's like, it's cool. It's a cool thing to do.
Yeah.
I get to experience that with them. The first time in their life that and some people are in horrible, horrible shape mentally, or they're anxious, they can't sleep. And to give them that experience and give them that relief, they go, wow. The other American that I went to teacher training with, I should tell you his story.
Please do.
So this is Danny, okay? Danny did 2 tours of duty in Fallujah, okay? Danny
In
grew up,
Iraq, in a very violent street-to-street
yeah,
combat situation.
he grew up in the South, okay? He went to military schools from the time he was a little kid. His parents were busy doing other things. Basically, he got brought up in these military academies, and he joined the Marines. As soon as he graduated from the military academy, he joined the Marines at 18 years of age. Okay,
Wow, as soon as he could
So
sign up.
and he's up in Fallujah, and he did 2 tours of duty, and he saw a lot of bad things happen there.
Yeah.
So he got back, and he had PTSD, major. Gun under the pillow. He was drinking, smoking, couldn't keep a job,
Sure.
depressed. Thought about killing himself. It was just in a horrible state of mind. It was just pitiful. And so I said, hey, you should think about learning Transcendental meditation. So he did, and it was like that relief, that super relief, that thinking that, wow, this is incredible. He's the only other American who was at teacher training with me. He learned TM. It was great. He visited Maharishi National University, became a student there for a little while. This is after 2 tours of duty in Fallujah. I said, man, I'm going to become a teacher. And went to teacher training. So this is the kind of effect it has. So that's a great story. I like to tell a story about Danny. So I still see him occasionally if I go up to Iowa. He's a character.
Maybe you can talk a little bit more about how the mind and the body are not a dual. They are not separate.
They're very intimately connected.
This is not a moral failing if you have PTSD. You're seeing with these scans of the brain, you're seeing actual organic problems, dysfunctions that, when improved upon by whatever means, if it's a healthy, natural, drug-free way with TM, are actually measurable. So it's not a moral thing. It's not like he's a bad guy. That there's actually healing and improvement that can be done at the tissue level, at the organ level.
Yeah, you said a real key thing there, I think, and I think it's something that is deep in our culture that we need to talk about and think about, because when somebody has problems like that, or from combat or rape or something, or if they have an addiction problem, then,
Right.
We see it as a moral failing. That's
Right.
kind of the way our culture is. Like, you're weak.
Right.
You're weak. You're a sinner. It's a moral failing. There's,
Right.
but there's changes that go on in the physiology and in the brain physiology that happen to people because of these issues. Okay, but we need to realize that the mind and the body are very intimately connected. Okay, but there are ways to get it better. So there's a neurophysiologist I know who wrote a beautiful book called "Your Brain's a River, Not a Rock." Okay.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. So that when you have problems like PTSD or addiction problems or whatever, moral failure. It's not a moral failure. You've got changes in your brain that are kind of causing you to do things and to think things, to have fears and anxiety and depression. Okay.
The poor guy's been shot at street to street in Fallujah. It's a reaction.
You get this experience of the transcendent, of transcendental consciousness, that falling within yourself, that peacefulness. Okay, it creates changes that improve things in the brain. Every experience that you have has an effect on our brain, on our neurotransmitters, on our connections. Okay, on those interconnections within the brain. Okay. And when you do TM, the interconnections between the prefrontal cortex and the rest of the brain become stronger and better. And all that hyperactive stuff, the amygdala, gets less. Okay, there's actual physiologic changes occurring in the brain that changes the rest of our physiology. That's why when you look at
I love it. You can feel the vagus nerve. You can just feel the relaxation.
Look at cortisol levels. If you look at cortisol levels like during sleep, you get rid of fatigue and stress when you sleep. And they go down a little bit. Okay, cortisol levels are indicative of, it's like a stress hormone.
Sure.
Okay, by the adrenal gland. So when you look at cortisol levels in a group sitting in a chair with eyes closed, compared to a group doing transcendental meditation, over just a 20-minute period of time, see this basically very little change in someone sitting there just with eyes closed in a chair. In transcendental meditation, you see reduction of about 30% of your cortisol levels when you
Oh, my
meditate,
goodness.
and then it continues on to be significantly lower. So just that one level alone, it has a big effect.
That's a slam dunk, David.
There's a bunch of physiologic things like that you can measure. You talked about the vagus nerve, the other part of it, which is part of the nervous system that has to do with the heart rate and our gut and stuff. You can do like what's called galvanic skin response testing. Okay?
That's part of the lie detector.
Yeah, you put two electrodes on the palm, okay,
right.
or one on the finger or on the palm, and you put a little current between those two electrodes. If you're nervous, your sympathetic nervous system activates and your sweat glands in the palm of your hand secrete a little bit more sweat. That increases the conductivity between those two electrodes. Okay,
you can measure that on a graph.
So you can measure that in people sitting in a chair with eyes closed and compare it to people sitting there and doing transcendental meditation. There's a huge difference. Another, there's a p-value of 0.0005 or something. There's always different measures that you can do. So it's not a mood thing. It's not a kind of a fantasy that is this real? There's always different real changes that occur. One thing I wanted to bring out, I said the word mood, and it brought to mind that one comparison to transcendental meditation to, say, something like mindfulness, these other techniques, is that you do transcendental meditation, you get settled, you come out, and you do your job. You're active, okay, and you do your job, and you do it the best that you can possibly do it, whatever your job may be, whether you're making babies, medically wise.
Making babies. That's what we do.
Or whether you're putting a tire on a car or something, you do your job, and you don't think about TM. You don't make a mood of anything. It's like, oh, now I'm a meditator, and I'm what's this word I was saying?
Right.
Oh yeah, and everything's peaceful. Yeah, it's not like that. Okay. TM is like, it's great for Western cultures because we're active, creative, dynamic people, and that's what we need. We need active, creative, dynamic people. So, and we don't think, well, I'm going to be mindful of kind of this. It's not a mood-making process. We meditate, and it creates changes, and those changes can come out in our behavior, okay, in terms of our brain changes and stuff, but we don't make a mood of it. It's not like, oh, gee, I'm going to be all peaceful and nice and pleasant, and because I'm a meditator, and I can't get mad, and I can't get too happy.
You're not virtue signaling, and mood follows action.
Yes. So
it's like trying to be happy. You can't try to be happy. You do a good job. You be a good person, then you get happy.
So you just it's a natural technique, and your behavior during the day is just natural. You just be natural.
Well, David, what a fantastic explanation of transcendental meditation. What a fantastic learning experience for me. I just got to tell you, talking to you about this, I know how to do it. I don't do it regularly.
Got to be regular.
Maybe a regularity is a good thing. Maybe
it's really important.
Maybe I'm going to start doing this myself again.
And there's actually statistical proof of that. Okay, that study we were talking about, stroke, heart attack, death,
Yes.
So those people that were taught to meditate, not all of them were doing it, 20 minutes twice a day, every day. Some people were not quite so regular. So they divided those two groups into people that were irregular and people that were regular. And there was a statistical difference in terms of the rate of those three indicators, heart attack, stroke, and death, between those two groups.
So there's what's called a dose dependency. If you do it right, full dose is better than half-assed.
Being regular is very important, and there's statistical proof of it.
Fantastic. Well, David, I've learned an awful lot. If somebody listening or watching wants to get a hold of you or a TM teacher, how would they do that?
So if you're in mid-Missouri and you want to learn, you can contact me on my email address, which is D as in David, D McLaren, McLaren like the car, McLaren, dmclaren@tm.org. Email me, I'll get a hold of it. The other thing, if you're not in mid-Missouri, okay, then if you go to the website, tm.org, and it's got a lot of information on that website. A little thing will pop up. They'll say, hey, if you want to find a teacher, put in your your name, your email address, and if you want to, your phone number,
Sure.
and a teacher. And so that information you get will get sent to the teacher in your area. Okay.
So there's a
So,
network of teachers in the United States
Yeah,
and around the world.
Yeah, around the world. So there are teachers everywhere. There's centers everywhere. So there's teachers in St. Louis. There's teachers in Kansas City. There's teachers in Cape Girardeau, and there's lots of teachers in the East and West Coast. If you travel
Sure.
around the world, if you go to London, you want to get your TM checked. It's like, oh, I'm at teaching. Like, you can go to the TM center. Okay, there's centers all the world.
There's big one in
Singapore,
Switzerland too, right?
everywhere,
Everywhere.
everywhere. I mean, the only
Fantastic.
place I could think of that where there's not is maybe North Korea. Okay. TM in some of the countries, and I won't say the names, but it's kind of
Yeah.
taught kind of underground, and a
Sure.
few. But even like in places like China, it's taught in China. When I was there at teacher training in Thailand, there was some people there getting some what we call advanced techniques, and they were all Chinese, 4 groups of them, group from Taiwan, one group from Hong Kong, one group from Beijing, and one group from Shanghai. So these are, there's a lot of conflict
Chinese
going on,
centers.
right?
Yeah, right.
But
Unity there.
it was like, man, we're all in the TM. It's like, so it's taught everywhere you can think of.
Good. Well, we'll put some links in the description below.
Okay.
Once again,
Thanks
what
for
a
having me. Thanks a lot. It's a lot of
Wonderful
fun.
discussion,
Yeah.
Dave. It was great to see you. Thank you for coming tonight.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Gil.
See you,
Good to
buddy.
see you again.